The sound of pages turning means it's time for another episode from the Meredith Library Podcast Studio, bringing you the library's latest news, information, and fun.
Good afternoon, Anna.
Good afternoon, Matthew.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode number 36 of Check It Out here on the Meredith Library Podcast Studio.
All right, we have a guest in the studio with us today. Would you like to introduce them?
We have Eliza, Leadbeater, with us today, and we are very excited to learn all about her background, and what she does for us here at the Meredith Public Library.
Eliza, hello. It's so nice to have you here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Well, Eliza, we are going to get right into it because I know you have so many fascinating things to share with us this afternoon. So we have a list of questions for you, and Anna has the first one right here, so I'm going to let her take it away.
Yes, before we get into your role here at the library, we are so fascinated to learn a bit about your background. And I know this could be 2 hours, but if you would like to tell us a little bit even about careers you've had or interesting places you've lived or just some notable experiences in your life.
Briefly?
Yeah, it's going to be hard.
Well, I don't think I've had a career path like most people. And to be perfectly honest, recently, when you get my age, you think about writing your obituary and leaving it for your family. I decided to best describe myself as a stage manager because every job I've done has been behind the scenes to make other people shine, so to speak.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell us more.
My undergraduate degree is in Parks and Recreation. So I worked for the town of Brattleboro. I was assistant superintendent of Parks and Recreation. And then I ended up going to England following love. And there it was very different. I was told when I started looking for opportunities that no one organized their leisure. So it was very, what a line, yes. So I went back to college and studied for my teaching certification and majored in arts and crafts and also in theater.
Wow. So were you an elementary or high school arts teacher at some point or no?
The program for me to be certified to teach in England was a 3-year program with the college attached to the University of Kiel. And I got to do it in 2 years. But you had to do all the same work. But I did a year, and then we came back to the States. My husband was working on his PhD in physics. Then I had actually my greatest acting role. I taught physical education in the inner city of Buffalo.
Oh, well, that must have been interesting.
It was very interesting times. It was during civil rights. And we were often locking the school down because of riots and protests and the like. Then I returned to England, finished my final year, and had a job as a teacher youth leader. And this was something very, very new in Britain. And I worked part-time in the schools and part-time in a youth center and worked with kids from 14 to 21. And at that time, the school leaving age had been raised from 14 to 16. And the kids that I was involved with were mainly from the slums of Liverpool. Much to my English part of the family's horror, I was asked to teach English.
That must have been so interesting, an American teaching English in England.
Well, and at the time, Sesame Street was showing for the first time on TV. And the kids would come up to me trying to speak to me, and they'd say, "You want a cookie, miss?"
In an American accent?
Yeah, in an American accent. Sesame Street was soon taken off television, I will tell you, because they didn't like the way kids learned to pronounce things or the way they learned to spell things.
Oh, that's funny and true. Makes sense.
Soon after, when I was in America, I had learned to spin from a Canadian woman who grew up in a log cabin. Soon after we returned to England and I was teaching for a few years, I became ill and was facing surgery and wasn't able to teach. And various people asked if we could copy something I had in my textile collection. And we started doing a lot of things for museums. And out of that grew a textile business. I designed and we manufactured hand textile equipment for spinning and weaving.
Oh, that's so amazing. It's such a lost art, too, these days.
Well, back in those days, I remember when going to the bank to ask if I could get some funding to import some things. We were working on some spinning wheel designs with two companies, particular from New Zealand. And the bank manager said to me, "Spinning and weaving? We've just come out of the mills. Nobody's going to be interested in that stuff." And of course, the other reason I couldn't borrow money was I was a woman, and women could not borrow money back in those days in England. And if you were a married woman, you really couldn't have a bank account in your own name. It was your husband's name.
Wow.
But I went on and we grew that business. We exported product regularly to over 30 different countries. We did a lot of work for Her Majesty's government in third world countries and had a lot of very interesting visitors over the course of time. One of them I mentioned earlier to you was the High Commissioner for Trade from New Zealand. He traveled north. We lived in a little tiny village of about 500 people in the northwest part of England, near to the Welsh border, in a county called Cheshire, which was known for its cows. We were surrounded by dairy cows and was always teased at the pub because we raised goats, as well as rare breeds of sheep. But the High Commissioner for New Zealand came. He wanted to meet the person who was sending so much wool to New Zealand.
Oh my gosh.
And which was very funny. And only a couple of months before he even came up to visit me, I had another visitor from New Zealand. It was the Archbishop of New Zealand who was visiting England for the Lambert Conference. And he came up because his wife had a whole shopping list of things wool she wanted. And I remember him saying to me, "Please wrap it up so nobody knows what's in it. It's my only day off. I've come 200 miles and walked 9 miles into your village."
For wool.
For wool. Yes.
Sounds like something from an Academy Award-winning drama.
Not quite, but it was always humorous. You just never knew who was going to show up at your door.
Oh, wow. How did you end up donating your time and labor here in Meredith after all of these different careers and ventures?
And that's not even half of it, you know. But I retired. My last job was I was the first director of the Belknap County Economic Development Council. I came here in 92 when a group of business people came together and asked the county if the county could work with them to form this organization. And at the time, there was 11.5% unemployment. It was closer to 17%. And 5 banks had collapsed. Just about everything needed financing. And some of the very big industries here in Meredith needed. And we set to work. And in my mind, economic development, I approached it probably a lot different than most people thought it should be approached. It's not simply about manufacturing industry. It's about all aspects of our economy. And I got very involved in tourism and value-added agriculture and other needs that we had that made this county so significant. You know, I think we accomplished a lot. We had the first nonprofit loan fund. We borrowed money from the Department of Agriculture and actually got recognized on the floor of the U.S. Senate for the work we were doing. And we later got recognized by the Small Business Administration as a financial advocate for business. And we were the first nonprofit ever to receive that. I can tell you lots of things that were first. We became a model for the other 9 economic development groups, and I helped form what was known as the Alliance of New Hampshire Economic Development Organizations. You know, it was a challenge. But we saw, tremendous results. By the mid-90s, the state had done a survey and found that per population, we had created the most jobs. We also discovered we were the best wired county. The hospital came to me, the president of the hospital, and said, "I got to be on this information highway for my doctors. What can you do about it?" And with superintendent of schools, Andre Parquet, a very dear friend who recently passed away, we formed an entity called LRNet. It was the first internet company. It became a little bit too complicated and time-taking, so we passed it on to an entity called WorldPath. But again, in 96, the state did a study seeing where technology and internet was, and Belknap County was recognized as the best wired, with the most options at the best prices. And it was really, interesting. I mean, we didn't set out to do that. We were oblivious. Oh, really? Well, thanks for telling us. We've got something else we got to get on with.
So you didn't know that you were a trailblazer in all kinds of different ways.
No, I always think of, people always say to me, why did you do it? And I always say, because it had to be done. And, part of it, I always remember a very dear board member saying to me, you do this like quilt making, don't you? And in reality, we did. In a small rural area, nobody gives you a big blank check to do something with and the ability. So it's all little pieces that you have to put together. And that's what's so amazing about the county we live in and the ability to work together.
Would you think that doing things like slower, kind of the rural state kind of makes it have a bigger longevity just because you're building those like foundations and relationships slower?
I really hope that's what we have done. And I look around and, it's been 33 years actually since I came here to launch the Economic Development Council. And, many of those businesses have thrived and, many too that were about to close their doors, and we were able to rescue them with financing and work with the banks to, take the bad end of the deal. Mm-hmm. So, I see a lot there. So how did that lead me to the library? So I retired, and my friends knew how much I loved libraries, and I lived in New Hampton. But I did, come over to Meredith quite a bit, and they gave me a gift membership in the library. And I was only here a few months when they restarted the Friends group, and you were asked if you'd like to volunteer. And I said, well, yeah. What would you like to do? And I said, well, I love books. Part of my business, I used to specialize in books, and I'm also the author of several books and used to write only on request any of this stuff for a magazine. And I was actually the Dear Abby for a magazine, on a textile magazine, So that's how I got started. And originally what we used to do was look up the value of books. There was a core group of us, and the more valuable ones would be sold on Abe, and then the others would be put in the book sale. And one day I said to the person who was leading the charge, Ann Butler, and could I take some of these books and see if I could get an antique dealer to let us sell them on a shelf? And she said, okay. And the first month we sold $100 worth of books.
That's just the beginning, though, yes.
Yeah, that was just the beginning. So, and eventually, we couldn't keep up with Abe. You wait a long time sometimes to sell a book on Abe. And so we started looking at other opportunities. And a few years down the line, it was friends that asked me if I'd find a place for a bookstore. And
I remember that. I used to have the Once Read books.
Once Read books,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And it was first on the back of 44 Main Street. We partnered with Artisans by the Bay. It was another group I started so that we could rent the space, mm-hmm. and the artisans, to be perfectly honest, paid most of the rent for us and helped us out when we didn't have volunteers there. But we had to close that for a combination of reasons. And then we looked for some space. The Artisans, as a business, there were 5 of us who basically owned it. We passed that business to Oglethorpe so the Artisans could continue. And then eventually space became available over in the plaza where Hannaford is. And we reached out and we managed to get that space. And with the help of several people and friends, the Whitings and Sylvia Dresser and her husband Dave, we plastered and painted and cleaned and got the place ready to use as a bookstore. And it was pretty successful. It was great reaching out to the community. The nicest part about it was we got a lot of visitors from out of state. Right. Who were visiting the community, and we got them interested in coming to the library, too.
And what year did that first start where you said that you had come here and they had just restarted the Friends group?
Probably 07, 08, and we didn't start the bookstores until 2016. And we only had the bookstores all told a little over 2 years, although we had a nice space down in the Concord Antique Center before COVID.
I don't know if that correctly leads or directly leads to the bookstore we have in the basement now, or is that a separate branch of the story?
We wanted to continue having a bookstore, but there's very little available. If anybody knows anything on Main Street that they'd like to make available to us. After the construction was over, Erin asked me if I would clean the room in the basement, which we affectionately call the dungeon. And I got that cleared up. And then she asked if I would set up in the old community room a bookstore. And you probably remember, Matthew, going around and helping me carry down bookcases that I found in all sorts of places, you and Chris, and getting them set up. So that was the start of it. And at that point, we could only stock it with ex-library books, which had been pulled during rehab of the library and the expansion. And then with time, we've been transferring them out to really nice books. So today, we operate the bookstore. We have the book sales 3 times a year. And then we still sell books off-site at the Antique Center at Cackleberries, where we have a lot of cooking and gardening books. Occasionally we sell on Marketplace online. Recently I posted aviation books and construction books and the like, and people have come from Maine and Vermont, and even one of those boxes I know went down to North Carolina. Yeah.
So our influence spreads all over the place.
Yes.
So then can you tell us how we obtain all those books? As you said, it's no longer just books that are coming out of the library. So people are donating books to the Friends. So can you explain how that works?
We get books from all sorts of people, and we welcome fiction, nonfiction, for any age group. The only thing that we really ask is that they be the type of book you'd be prepared to hand someone personally. That they're not moldy or smoke-filled or ripped covers or filled with lots of notes and different information. We don't take textbooks, although we've taken a lot of books to help teachers, and we've made sure they've gone to schools or to other entities that we know can get them into the hands of people studying to be teachers and the like. We do accept all different things, and we try to find the end place. It's not necessarily that they're going to go to the bookstore or to the book sale. And to give you an idea of some of the things that we do, when the books come in, the first thing, of course, is we sort them. The ones that we feel are good, we then look at them and clean them up. And folks that work with me are always amazed with my secret formula for cleaning books. And then we decide what's the best destination. Are they going to go to the bookstore? Are they going to go upstairs to the historic reading room or off to the Antique Center? Or are they, something we might want to put in the little free libraries? Or we get a lot of self-help books, and I find that they go very well at the various cafes around town, so we will take them there. We put books aside for youth groups and childcare groups. At the end of the book sale, the last one being in September, we will take the youth books and donate them to the Boys and Girls Club here in Laconia, and they distribute them across the region. And it's exciting for the kids to get that. Some of the food programs we donate them to. Altrusa takes books for us to Hands Across the Table. Being almost 2 years ago now, we sent over 1,000 books to 2 libraries in Kentucky. They had been damaged by tornadoes and floods, and they were amazed. I researched both communities. One was a very small community of about 4,000, 5,000 people. They loved hunting and fishing and kayaking, and they had the largest elk population east of the Mississippi. I even found a cookbook on cooking elk meat. Wow. And the other community was more the size of Laconia, but had a big Amish influence, and, we sent them quilting books, and the librarians were blown away by the quality of the books that we sent. And so, when we sell books, we're making proceeds, and I know you're probably going to ask me what we do with the money. To send those books was close to $500, and that was only half the price, but because we were sending from library to library, and the post office cuts the price in half when they do that.
So, Eliza, it sounds like there is a lot of intention and thought put into when you receive a book donation of where it will go, where it will be best suited to the community or to the business that can best utilize it.
Yes, that's the truth. That's the pleasure I get out of it. The end destination, whose hands it's going to be in. And occasionally we'll get something that really needs to be put in the archives of another library. We often get mid to late 1800s books, and we'll look to see if we can find a specialty book dealer where we sometimes sell to other book dealers. We've had to turn donations away, mainly because we just don't have the space. I've turned several very large collections away recently.
I do have a question. So the team that you work with, is it all volunteers?
We're all volunteers, yep.
How many people?
It varies. 5 or 6 people come down. We can always use help.
And these are people that actually are working, as you said, on the dungeon side of the basement. So that number of 5 or 6, that is different and separate from the people who volunteer to staff the bookstore.
Oh, the bookstore
right?
has a wonderful assortment of people who come, and there are dozens.
We've been talking a lot about all this stuff that you're doing and all these books that you're selling. We didn't get down to the nitty-gritty of all that cash that comes in. So can you tell us about, A, how much money is brought in from all these things that go on, and where does it all go?
If I think about last year, 2024, probably the bookstore brought in about $7,000 in sales. And remember, it's donations. We have some recommendations on prices, but for the most part, our books are a lot cheaper than elsewhere, even other secondhand stores. As far as the book sale, they raised over $4,500 last year with the 3 sales. Now we have a sale coming up in June, and we have a sale coming up in September. And so the other place, the offsite sales with the Antique Center, I think last year it was maybe somewhere just under $3,000 in books that we sold. Offsite sales in the last 10 years, and we probably did over $25,000.
That is so impressive. I mean, and the fact that all these people, starting with you and everyone, are all volunteers. So all this money is the money that comes back to the library.
Yeah, just like feeding it back into the community in some way. Eliza, I want to say this. There's this phrase that I tell Matthew sometimes, but I feel like you embody it. You are so booked and busy. Like, just everything you're doing. It's just it's so impressive.
Well, as I started out to say, I've been a stage manager. I've worked between economic development, which is staging things for other people. I've worked for higher education. I've worked for several colleges and universities. But the idea is, put things in place for people. And, it's not about you. It's about the president of the university or the chairman of your board. And this is about what we as an entity can do for the community. So there's a bunch of us backstage with no makeup on.
Well, and it's so admirable to set all that up and let other people shine, but you do deserve to get an acknowledgement for the insane amount of work you've done, not only in this community, but it seems like in countless communities over the course of your life. And we are so blessed to have you here as a member that is really positively impacting not just the library, but Meredith and the other towns as a whole.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you.
Yeah. All right, Eliza, is there anything else you want to say or let the podcast audience know before we say goodbye to you?
I don't think so. I think I've said more than I usually do, and I think people know more about me than I would really like them to know about me. And that's why I hide out in the dungeon.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today, and we will see you around. And if people see you around, maybe they can just know in their head that they've learned things about you, but maybe not say anything to your face about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Liza. It was a pleasure. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We really had a great time. We will be back very soon with our next episode, and we look forward to it. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Podcast music titled Daytime TV Theme by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0.
Podcast copyright 2025. Meredith Library Podcast Studio.